Many years ago, I heard a talk at a commencement in which the speaker asked some very pointed questions in a rather novel way. The general topic was, how grown up are you? One of the questions he asked, can you tell a wooden nutmeg? Up in New England, the peddlers used to try to pawn off these wooden nutmegs for the real thing. So he wanted to know whether or not they had learned how to keep from being cheated. The second question was, can you earn a bicycle? And these days, so much of the education of young people is being paid for by their parents or their grandparents or someone else. And this commencement speaker wanted to know whether or not they had learned how to earn anything for themselves. But I think the question that stands out most clearly in my memory was the question, can you change the shape of your feet? Can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? For there are some for whom it would take more than a blowtorch to get them out of their own. It came back to me a short time ago when I read Dr. Paul Freed's account of his visit to the Holy Land. He was talking about the distribution of the clothes that were given to the people in Jordan. And he said, while I watched that distribution, I found myself wondering what it would be like to be wearing the clothes of someone else. He apparently was not the youngest child of a big family. Then it occurred to me that this is precisely what Christianity means. Eternally being in someone else's shoes. And there's much truth in that. At least in the suggestion that it's important for us to be able to imagine ourselves there, to imagine the difficulties that other peoples are facing, to imagine their heartaches, to imagine all of their problems. The unforgiving servant in that 18th chapter of Matthew owed the king 10,000 talents. He couldn't pay it, and he was ordered sold, and his wife and his children and all that he had. And so this servant begged of the king that he please have patience, and he would eventually pay the debt. And the king was moved with compassion, and he forgave him. That same man was owned 100 pence by another. A mere pittance compared with that which was forgiven him, and mercy was asked of him, but he refused to give it. One would have thought that one who had been through his experience would certainly have behaved differently. One would expect him to say, I understand your plight. I know you that the fear of the law has been brought down on you, and because I have been spared, I'm going to spare you. But he evidently forgot so quickly. Forgot what it was like to stand in the shoes of some person who needed help. Pity the one who lacks that capacity. I heard once of a mule who had strayed from his owner. And the latter thought for a while, and then he went to a certain field, and there was the mule, and when he was asked how in the world he knew to go there first, he said, I just thought, what would I do if I were a mule? Now, there are some people in our acquaintance that don't have to strain too hard to know what it's like. They find it a good deal more difficult to imagine what they would do if they were someone else. They find it much more difficult to change shoes. Now, this problem speaks to a good many areas. Might it not be good if we in America, for a time, could just imagine ourselves in other people's shoes, not from the point of view of what they may be suffering, but the criticisms that they may be leveling at us, would the Lord the gift to give us to see ourselves as others see us? And very honestly, very frankly, to listen to those criticisms without becoming angry. I wonder what we would hear. For instance, there are some Americans who seem to feel that the rest of the world would like nothing better than our way of life if they could only get it. Rather egotistical of us, isn't it? If we could place ourselves in the shoes of some of those people, we would find certainly that many millions of them would wish for the food, for the plenty that we have in America. Many more millions would wish for the freedom that we have in America. Many more would wish for our democracy. Many more would wish for our freedom of speech. Many more would wish for freedom of religion. But then gradually we would find ourselves running out of those who wanted things. And if we listened again without becoming indignant, we might find ourselves saying, probably they're right. Some of the blights and the blemishes that we probably overlook when we're living within our own country. If we lived in another country, we might be very much shocked, for instance, at what they are saying about the way we seem to have surrendered to alcoholism. We might be shocked at the picture that we are giving to the world of broken homes, low morals. If we went into a Muslim nation, we would find, if we were standing in their shoes, that they look on us as a nation that is almost devoid of taboos and disciplines. From the point of view of crime, which takes up so much of our daily newspapers, do you realize that there is more danger of being shot in the United States of America than any other nation in the world? We give generously to other lands. But if we are standing in their places, we may hear them said, "You are not fooling us at all. You are not giving out of the goodness of your heart. You're giving because you're afraid if you don't give, Russia will give ahead of you." These things are said. They also say, "We don't like the way you handle a very serious business of war. In your nation, in the United States, you say that you cannot declare war without the consent of your Congress. So if you want to fight someone, you just go ahead and fight without declaring war. And isn't this making something of a farce and a mockery of your vaunted system of checks and balances? You talk of your church, and they would point to the statistics of the Protestant church, and I don't know the statistics of the Roman Catholic, that for all causes the Protestant church gave something in the area of $3 billion last year. Unless we think that that is a lot of money, these people point out to us why that's just the bit that your president hopes he can cut the budget next year. Troublesome business standing in other people's shoes. What about this business of race? Have we asked ourselves very honestly what it might be like to stand in the shoes of a colored person? Warren Cuny wrote a poem on it. Well, he said it's like going to bat with 2 strikes already called on you. It's like playing pool with your name written on the 8 ball. Did you ever say thank you, sir, for an umbrella that's full of holes? Did you ever dream $1 million and wake up with nothing to pawn? You want to know what it's like being colored? Well, the only way to know is to be born that way. Disturbing business, this race problem. And so they ask, how can a nation that's dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal tolerate some of the abuses against their citizens? What kind of race of hypocrites are you raising? How can a nation that professes so boldly perform so anemically? Is the democracy of which she speaks a sham? What about the hundreds of millions of Bibles that you say you have in the United States? Do you read them without seeing? Do you hear without listening? Well, might the person of another color say, if you discriminate against me because I am dirty, I can make myself clean. If you discriminate against me because I am bad, I can reform and be good. If you discriminate against me because I'm ill-mannered, I can improve my manners. But if you discriminate because of my color, you discriminate against me because of something God Himself gave me and over which I have no control. Disturbing business. And God help us if we're not disturbed. As a nation, it might be good for our souls now and then to change the shape of our feet. Try to see ourselves as others see. More than that, on the personal level, when we see ourselves standing in other people's shoes, we usually are helped to understand them. We usually understand the better to know why they're behaving as they do. Recently, the newspapers reported that Britain has started a school to teach sensitivity. For a day, a child is blindfolded so that he will have some idea of what it's like for a person to be blind. For a day, he will have stopped to put in his ear so that he will know what a blessing it is for him to have hearing. We think that somebody was unsympathetic when we were going through a trouble. Could it be that he still has an open wound of his own? He knew that he couldn't speak to us without breaking down and making things worse than they were. The fact is that very often there are explanations for the actions of people that we do not understand until we're standing where they stand. That's what that lesson in Ezekiel was talking about this morning. It's a great verse towards the conclusion of it. The prophet had gone to the Jewish captives in Babylon, and he began his ministry there, and his fellow Israelites were huddled together with their downcast spirits and their heavy hearts. And if there was anything in the wide world that they needed badly, it was a little understanding and a little hope and a little inspiration. And so the prophet says that he sat where they sat. He saw light from where they were sitting, and he ministered unto them. I imagine this would make us more understanding, less prone to criticize, if we did sit there, try to understand what makes them behave as they do, make this a kind of standard operating procedure. We mightn't come to the place where we would be talking about what the 12-year-old girl said was not the golden rule, but the diamond rule. To think about others as you would have them think about you. Then, too, by putting ourselves in other people's shoes. Doesn't this speak to people who are the end of all their living? They're unmoved by everything that is around them. Just so long as misery doesn't come to them. Another's happiness is not their happiness. Another's trouble is not their trouble. So it was with the man in the gospel story. When he was in debt, his only concern was how he might take care of this debt to save himself. And when someone owed him money, his one concern was how he could collect the debt for himself. All of his doors coming in. Dear old William James, the philosopher, wrote to a friend when he was a youngster about a summer home that his family had just bought. He wrote words the kind of which we expect from children, because in so many of these things it is true, the little child shall lead us. He said to his friend, "It's a wonderful house, with all the doors opening outward." Now that's a pretty good picture. It's a wonderful house with all the doors opening outward. What a great thing it is if one had hands that were opening outward in giving, and one had the doors of his heart opening outward in understanding, if one had a heart that was opening outward in loving. Alfred Luckock once preached a sermon on that great text in 2 Corinthians, the 6th chapter and the 13th verse. It says, "Widen your hearts." And I recall Dr. Luckock going on to say that for one to be a good novelist, he has to become very provincial about the person who is the center of the story. He has to become very provincial about the village of which he's writing. And that probably one of the best examples that we have of it is Austen's Pride and Prejudice, that she was rebuked, though, because she did not look out of the window and see the French Revolution which was going on. But she did give us a picture of the Bennet family. But you see, there are times in life when that's not enough. There are times in life when it's not enough to be provincial, when it's not enough just to see the Bennet family. There are times when it's mighty essential that we get the doors of our hearts opening out, that we widen. You know that word in the dictionary, empathy? We don't use it very often. But it's quite a word. It's defined as the imaginative projection of one's own consciousness into another being. We could use some of that. The imaginative projection of one's own consciousness into another being. Abraham Lincoln hastened to the War Department one day because he had heard that the brother and the sister-in-law of General Lew Wallace were there. And when we entered the door, the sister-in-law said, "Oh, Mr. President, we saw where General Wallace had been killed. And we thought it was our General Wallace. Thank God it wasn't." With those great sad eyes of his, Abraham Lincoln looked at her, and he said, "Yes, my dear, but it was somebody's Wallace." Doors opening out. That was Lincoln. Everybody's Wallace was his Wallace. He sat where they sat, he stood where they stood, and this was the power of Jesus Christ. This was one of the great, rich qualities of Jesus Christ. This ability of his to understand what was going on in the soul of another person. This ability of his to see the leper when no one else saw. That blind man by the roadside when everyone else just seemed to go by and couldn't care less. This man who could walk along the street and in the midst of a crowd he could feel the tug of a woman on his garment, a woman who needed some help. So well did he understand the plight of others that on behalf of his tormentors he said, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." That's empathy. That's Jesus Christ. One of the great commandments, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." This is what we're talking about. This ability to live where they're living. Imagine yourself going through what they're having to go through. To experience what they are experiencing. To take the key of love and of understanding and to put it into their hearts and try to see what's there. It means trying to stand in his place. Can you change the shape of your feet? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.